Hello, this is Dr. Jack Wolfson, paleocardiologist of the Doctors Wolfson, for another informational webinar for you today. And again, a little bit about me. I am a board-certified cardiologist. I went through 4 years of medical school, 3 years of internal medicine, 3 years of cardiology, and I served as the chief fellow of my cardiology class. I was a senior partner of a large cardiology group up until 2012, when I left that group to start my own practice, Wolfson Integrative Cardiology and the Doctors Wolfson. I was the chairman of the Department of Internal Medicine, director of cardiac rehab, chairman of cardiology, and in 2011, I was voted Phoenix Top Doc by my peers and Top Holistic MD up until 2016. I'm also the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Paleocardiologist, The Natural Way to Heart Health. Here we talk about a lot of different things, including the truth about cholesterol, which is the subject of today's presentation. So by attending this PowerPoint presentation, you will learn that coronary disease is in crisis mode, the importance of cholesterol. You will learn the blood tests you need to determine what we really need to know regarding your risk. We'll talk about nutrition to improve your cholesterol numbers and the best supplements to modify your number, and so much more, of course. This presentation is meant for informational purpose only. The content is solely the opinion of Dr. Jack Wolfson. The presentation is not meant to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any disease. Please speak with your healthcare provider regarding any change in your healthcare plan. This is the world I come from. This is the world of cardiology, where there is just coronary artery disease. Here you can see there's contrast dye injected and the pipe looks pretty good until we get to about right here. And then obviously we can see a very tight blockage. And that blockage happens for a number of reasons. And I'm going to talk to you during this presentation and tell you why it is not a cholesterol problem. There's other things that are leading to this issue. Now, the cardiologists love this because, frankly, this is how they make money. This is millions of stents per year. This is bypass surgeries, are extremely common, over 500,000 times in the United States alone. And these levels are just way, way, way too high. Coronary artery disease stents bypasses are sometimes unnecessary and almost always avoidable. Just look at the prescription drugs that have been filled in 2014. You've got 3 drugs for cholesterol. You've got 3 drugs for blood pressure. You've got things for diabetes. You've got when you blow out your thyroid because of this, all the pharmaceuticals, you take thyroid drug, and then you have heartburn and you get infected, so you need antibiotics. And then the top one, of course, is a pain pill. Now, this is what they think causes heart disease. This is what we are essentially taught in medical school. Bad luck. We are deficient in cholesterol drugs, aspirin, blood pressure drugs, family history, and they think that it's a cholesterol problem. Ooh, look at that big boogeyman, cholesterol, that big piece of fat. That is what the problem is. Well, Time magazine told us many years ago, and now the bad news. Eggs are bad and bacon is bad, but the good news is there has been a resurgence of both of those foods, and what we now recognize is what we've learned since the dawn of time in evolution, is that the main problem is sugar and carbs and all of the environmental pollutants and the unhealthy behaviors most people engage in. So we're going to talk about that. Cholesterol is king. This is chapter 1 of my book, because once we tell people what cholesterol is, then people will understand the importance of it and embrace it and not be demonized by it. Now, what is cholesterol? Cholesterol is just 3 things: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. There is no heavy metals in here. There are no environmental pollutants. There's no phthalates or BPA from plastic. There's nothing in there except for carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The body makes it for a multitude of reasons, including the cell membrane, that ever important cell fence that holds every cell together. It decides what gets into the cell and what gets out of the cell. And a healthy cell membrane is so important. And wouldn't you know that the cell membrane is loaded with cholesterol? Cholesterol, of course, is critical for digestion. That's why your liver makes it, to put it into the bile and into the gallbladder, where the gallbladder squeezes its juices on top of food coming from the stomach and mixes all in together here. And it's that cholesterol that we use as part of bile acids and bile salts to help emulsify and digest our food. Cholesterol makes all of our sex hormones. If you see up here on the top, you have cholesterol, and then all these different enzymes modify it. So we get out here and we get testosterone, and we get estradiol, which is estrogen, and we get progesterone. And then, back over here, we've got cortisol. So this is obviously a very important molecule. That's why every animal species has it. That's why human beings have it. That's why cholesterol is inside of a chicken egg, because that's what a chicken needs to come to life. Now, the sun converts cholesterol into vitamin D. We all know how important vitamin D is. Vitamin D receptors are everywhere. Low vitamin D is linked to everything. Everything bad is associated with low vitamin D. And we get this from the sun, and the sun hits the cholesterol precursors and then turns it into vitamin D instead of excess cholesterol. So we want plenty of healthy sunshine. Once again, vitamin D receptors are located everywhere. So we can see how important vitamin D is. And once again, it is coming from cholesterol that is hit by the sunshine, and then vitamin D is made, and then it does so many remarkable things around the body. The vitamin D receptor, once again, here's just a little more information for those that are interested on how the vitamin D gets inside of the cell and makes all this genetic information happen. And then you can see what it does to the heart, and you can see what it does to the blood vessels, and then you can see also what it does for other cardiovascular risk factors, and just read on about what it does for the parathyroid hormone around the thyroid glands, what it does for blood sugar, what it does for lipids, what it does for kidneys and blood pressure, and also, of course, anti-inflammatory, antioxidative, and antimicrobial. So that vitamin D is super important, and you're not getting it necessarily from supplements, and you're certainly not going to be getting it in any significant amount in food. You get it from the sun. How is cholesterol made? Well, this is kind of a busy slide, but here we see that as we take in protein, carbs, and fats, they are all broken down. Eventually, all roads lead to acetyl-CoA. And as acetyl-CoA, it can go in two directions that I'd like to talk about now. One, of course, it goes down into the energy cycle, which is one of the main reasons why we consume food, is to generate energy at the cellular level and at the quantum level. But another possibility for acetyl-CoA is that it can be heading up backwards here to form lipids, and this is going to be our cholesterol and other particles. Now, acetyl-CoA starts off here, as we said, which comes from food carbs, from protein, carbs, and sugar, from protein, carbs, and fat. And from there, we go to this particular area that is now blocked by statin drugs called HMG-CoA. We want to go down this pathway. This is the way the body's naturally designed, but pharmaceutical statin drugs impede it right there. And then bisphosphonates, which so many people take for osteoporosis and supposed fracture prevention, they take that particular drug. And what do? We wind up reducing levels of cholesterol. But there's so many important things along this pathway, including these prenylated proteins, which we're not going to make because we're blocking production right here. We're not going to make things like dolichol, which is critical for brain function in the substantia nigra. And we see so many different things that affect dolichol, and statin drugs have to be one of those because you inhibit the formation right here. And without dolichol in the substantia nigra, that's where things like Parkinson's and other neurologic disorders come into play. And ubiquinone, of course, is CoQ10, so that's so important in that arena. Help me, I'm drowning in cholesterol, this whole sea of cholesterol. Our body's making it, as we said above. And there is, excuse me, there is a problem with, suppose there is an issue with cholesterol causing heart disease. Why would that be the case? Well, the truth is it doesn't. The composition of a coronary plaque is actually very, very complicated and very dynamic and very diverse about all the things that are inside of a coronary plaque. And it is not the fault of excess cholesterol that's doing it. It is an immune and inflammatory issue. It is the cholesterol is brought in to respond to the damage created from poor nutrition, environmental pollutants, lack of sleep, and lack of sunshine. We can see here from the Mr. Fit trial that cholesterol overall, as far as serum levels, is a poor risk predictor, because from here, in those two areas, we can see that from a total cholesterol of 160 to 260, the all-cause mortality risk is just about the same. It's at the very high levels of total cholesterol when you start to see accelerated cardiac risk, but also at the very low levels of cholesterol, you also see a spike in all-cause mortality. Dr. Michael DeBakey, famous cardiovascular surgeon who passed away at the age of 96, analysis of cholesterol values in 1,700 patients with atherosclerotic disease revealed no definite correlation between serum cholesterol levels and the nature and extent of atherosclerotic disease, the most famous cardiovascular surgeon in the history of the world. Now, when we talk about cholesterol, we can also break that down into the bad and the good, right? But that's all pharmaceutical speak. We're talking about low density lipoproteins here. This has often been called the bad, but in reality, there is no problem with LDL in general, but we can break down the LDLs into the bad and the good amongst the LDLs, and we'll be talking about that shortly. The LDL is like a bus. It is a bus that carries things around the body. The bus is made in the liver, and it carries things like fat-soluble vitamins around the body, carries cholesterol around the body, carries phospholipids, which are very important for brain and for cell membrane function. The LDL bus also carries around CoQ10 and is a absolutely critical fighter when it comes to immune function and keeping the body protected from viral particles, bacteria, so on and so forth. Now, typically when we've talked about LDL in the past, we've called this the bad cholesterol. Well, if we see here that LDL is inside of this cup and the LDL is represented as red, that is milligrams per deciliter, and that's how we've commonly looked at LDL as a total volume. But stay tuned now because I'm going to break this down. But LDL-C is a total volume inside that cup. Well, when you look at LDL-C inside the first trial, which was a statin drug trial, but let's just talk briefly about the placebo group. If you look at the 5-year study of cholesterol in the placebo group, if the LDL was less than 142, the event rate was roughly 5%. If the LDL was 143 to 156, the event rate was roughly 5%. If LDL was above 157, the event rate was 7%. So that is an increase of 2%. When you talk about event rate, what are events? Events are heart attacks, need for angioplasty, stents, bypass surgery. But in reality, there was no difference in mortality. There was no difference in who lived and who died, no matter what your LDL was in the placebo group. Now, what I like to do is I like to put it on a different scale, because what the pharmaceutical companies will do, they'll send in the beautiful looking drug reps, and the drug reps will talk about all the different glories of statin drugs. And they'll show you a little different graph than what we show here, because they're going to say, well, I'm not talking about 5% versus 7%, because the difference between 5% and 7% is a relative 20% difference. Well, or more, 30%. We're talking about something different. I'm talking about 5 versus 7%. And when you put it on this kind of a scale, it's not very impressive, is it? Well, they're not going to show us this type of stuff. This is what really matters, ladies and gentlemen. LDL particles, the large versus the small. because we can see that both these cups here represent a volume of LDL. But how is that volume made up? Is it made up of large, buoyant, fluffy LDL particles and not many of them? Or is it made up of mostly small, dense LDL particles? These are the ones that are damaged. These are the ones that easily cross endothelial lining of blood vessels to become part of coronary plaque. These are protective. These are destructive. We call this the Tim Russert syndrome because Tim Russert, may he rest in peace, was a weekend news anchor who, as you can see by his looks, without trying to be too judgmental here, he obviously does not appear to be healthy. And what we know from him is that he did have a history of coronary disease. He did take statin drugs, but there's no doubt that he had a lot of small, dense LDL particles floating around, and now he is no longer with us. We can see here from this depiction from the Journal of Clinical Lipidology that what really matters when you talk about the risk of having a heart attack, the risk is higher when you have a lot of LDL particles. When you have low LDL particles, your risk is low. And we can see here, this is LDL-C. This is how most doctors still measure, but you can see here that it doesn't matter what your LDL-C is because you could be at low risk or high risk. What matters is the particle number. I hope that makes sense to everybody. And if not, please go ahead and take another listen again to really make sure you get this concept down because this is so important. Now, we learned from the Inner Heart trial that the most important risk factor when it comes to cardiovascular lipids and lipids and risk, we can see here that it's this ApoB, ApoA ratio. And the ApoB is the stitching on the LDL baseball. I've kind of gone from the LDL particle being a bus to a baseball, but now it's the baseball floating around the body, and the stitching on that is ApoB. The stitching on the ApoA is the stitching on the HDL is an ApoA, and we can see here that the higher the ratio of ApoB, ApoA, the higher the risk. So we want to be down here so we have a lot of ApoAs and not too many ApoBs. And then conventional lab testing companies are really starting to get into this, really starting to take a look, and then we look at this all-important ApoB to ApoA ratio, and ideally we would be below 0.6. HDL, high density lipoprotein. Let's talk about HDLs, or what's commonly being considered to be the good cholesterol. Well, we can see here, once again, we've got these stitching on the baseball, this ApoA1, or here you can see in purple. And this is the HDL particle and all the magic that it performs. And inside there, you've got phospholipids, you've got triglycerides for energy, and LDLs are also a tremendous triglyceride storage molecule that shuttles triglycerides around the body as well. Now, HDL does so many different functions. It's really exciting on what this does. And everybody knows about its importance as removing cholesterol from areas where it is no longer needed and pulling from coronary plaque. But as you can kind of go around the wheel here, you see that it is an antioxidant, reduced angiotensin II signaling, so therefore helps with complications of high blood pressure and will reduce blood pressure, helps keep pancreatic beta cells healthy. That's pretty cool regarding blood sugar control and its importance as far as immune system function, and it's a natural blood thinner and keeps blood vessels healthy, anti-inflammatory. So it does so many different things. And we can see down here this little blip from the FINS study where if you have dysfunctional HDL, it actually inhibits insulin function and release from pancreatic beta cells. So we do not want to have a lot of dysfunctional HDL. And it appears that a lot of the problems from hormone replacement is that, yes, it did raise HDL numbers, but it created a lot of dysfunctional HDLs. And in fact, some people that have very high levels of HDL, they are making many because the body is trying to compensate for the fact that the ones that are being made are actually not very useful. So therefore, it's making more. So very high levels of HDL can actually be a negative prognostic factor or a negative to the person. And we can see here from the Framingham heart study when, this is really the kind of the sweet spot of HDL right here between 65 and 85. This is where most people would like to be. And you can see that if you have very low HDL, your risk is very high. And even really no matter what your LDL is, certainly as we get to lower levels of LDL, numbers start to look better. But the reality is what really matters is we want to have a lot of this good quality HDL, because if we have a lot of good quality HDL, it doesn't matter what your LDL numbers are. Higher vitamin D means higher HDL. So once again, get that sunshine. Triglycerides are also a very important component of any lipid panel assessment. And essentially, as you can see, the higher you go on triglycerides, the higher your risk. It is a linear equation. The triglycerides, which are fat storage particles, for energy storage particles, we want them as low as possible. And triglycerides are made from carbs and sugar. Triglycerides, what are they? They're this glycerol, what's called a backbone. And then we've got different types of fatty acids. And typically we can see a triglyceride that contains all three. We can see it with saturated fatty acid, monounsaturated fatty acid, and polyunsaturated fats, such as the omega-3s and omega-6s and omega-9s. So this is trying to depict what the triglyceride molecule is. And when it comes to fat storage, the body wants to store away excess triglycerides and use that for fuel for later on triacylglycerol or triglycerides. But what really, really cranks up the storage of this as fat is insulin. And when you have high levels of insulin that are coming from carbs and sugar, that is going to increase the storage of these particles into fat cells. Another molecule we like to test for is called Lp(a). Lp(a) is an LDL-like particle, but it's got this additional protein on the outside. And I like to think of that as a particle with razor blades, because Lp(a) increases risk of pretty much all things cardiac related. It blocks the natural clot busters of the body. So this Lp(a) particle here is floating around the body, and it interferes with the conversion of plasminogen to plasmin, which breaks up clots. So we do not want a lot of the Lp(a) floating around, because we do want to make we do want to convert plasminogen into plasmin, and this is a natural clot buster. And we can see here that the higher the Lp(a), the higher the cardiovascular risk. And we can measure that, and we should be measuring that. Most doctors, unfortunately, are not. I do. And this is what we need to do, is to make sure that we eat the right foods and watch out for all of those excess carbs. But I'll just pop a Lipitor and eat whatever I want. I mean, this is what doctors are trained. This is what we are trained to believe in. And I was no different. I was totally brainwashed by the system. Well, if we look once again at that first statin trial, where they gave people Lovastatin versus placebo, and we can see who the people were included. It was published in the biggest medical journal in the world almost 20 years ago. Here's what the cholesterol numbers were. They got Lovastatin or placebo, and they were monitored for over 5 years. And what we found from this trial, and there's some interesting information, and certainly cardiovascular events were decreased in the drug group. And there was small benefits seen in this arena, but let's take a look at total mortality at 5 years. No difference. Did the drug save lives? The answer is no. No difference in women either. Now we've got another trial called the Prosper trial, where they looked at 5,800 patients, and half of these people were women, so women were really well represented, and they got Pravastatin or placebo, and they followed them for 3 years. And we can see here once again that there was small benefits to taking the Pravastatin drug. But let's take a look at living and dying. Stroke death was actually higher in the pravastatin group. Heart disease death was lower in the statin group. Cancer death was higher in the drug group. Total mortality, no difference. There was no difference in lives saved when you talk about statin drug versus placebo. So now I've shown you 2 trials, and other trials do confirm that. Some, in all fairness, some trials show a mortality benefit in statin drugs for primary prevention, but if it does show benefit, the benefit is small. Now we get into something on the liver that helps clear out old LDL particles, and this is the LDL receptor. And the LDL receptor clears out old LDL. So we want to have a lot of LDL receptors on the liver, pulling out old cholesterol out of and old LDL particles that are floating around, clearing that out of the system. Well, there is a new drug that helps increase the number of LDL receptors, or those catcher's mitts on the liver, and they are seeing dramatic reductions when it comes to LDL particles. They're getting numbers down around LDL-C of 30. But does that save lives? According to the most recent trial, the answer is no. It did not decrease deaths from heart disease. It did not decrease deaths from all cause. So it's not about how do we reduce the risk of having a heart attack from 6% to 5%. It's about how do we reduce the risk down to 0%. That's the most important thing. How do we really, really reduce those, the risk of people to have these events? Well, this was a major, major opportunity financially for the pharmaceutical company Amgen. And you can see here that the potential market for these drugs that increase LDL receptors, like Repatha, the potential market on an annual basis is $250 billion. This is just mind-blowing stuff. What I'm all about is, what is your caveman cholesterol? What is your cave person cholesterol, your paleo cholesterol? Because when you eat the right foods, you achieve the right levels for you. And here we can see the paleo pyramid by the doctors Wolfson. And our foundation is, of course, vegetables, vegetables, vegetables. And I'm a big fan of using spices and herbs like rosemary, thyme, oregano, on, and adding that all to the food. And then above that, it's kind of up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. But meat, chicken, seafood, eggs are all part of a nutritious paleo lifestyle that our ancestors have been enjoying for millions of years. And we've got avocado and coconuts and olives and nuts and seeds and fruit in season. So this is really what's important, though. Over on the left, we're talking about free-range, grass-fed, ethically raised animals that have to be sacrificed in order for us to achieve optimal health. I didn't make up the rules. Mother Nature did. And of course, everything is organic and local whenever possible. So if there's any one thing that we can all agree on, please let us agree that everything should be organic without the pesticides and the genetically modified ingredients to go along with it. Could sunshine lower cholesterol? We talked about this before, so make sure you get sunshine. Our ancestors went to sleep with the sun down. They awoke with the sunrise, and then they were in the sun in and out throughout the day. So the more sunshine you get, the lower the cholesterol levels you have. The more sunshine equals lower risk of cardiovascular death. Would you believe that getting adequate amounts of sleep can improve your cholesterol levels? Sleep your way to better cholesterol. And there's me with my beautiful family, sleeping comfortably in our bed. Chiropractic care. Can chiropractic care help with cholesterol levels? Of course it can, because if we use the brain and the brain communicating to the rest of the body through the autonomic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system, of course, is broken down into the sympathetics and parasympathetics. And if you take a look at the sympathetics and the parasympathetics, and you modify those, you balance those as they should be, then you get incredible results. Evidence-based supplements. Big fan of supplements to supplement a healthy lifestyle. Spirulina is something that we have in our superfood, which is chlorella spirulina, all organic in glass. And you can see here the magic of what spirulina does. Total cholesterol is reduced by 47 points, LDL by 41, triglycerides by 44, and even raises HDL by 6. And it is not about lowering cholesterol just to lower it down. It is about eating the right foods to find the perfect levels for each individual person. And chlorella also has some data on there as well. So it's not just about the spirulina, it is also about chlorella. So we can see some fantastic things in there. Berberine does some absolute magic. Berberine has been studied by the Chinese for 75 years, and it is found in a variety of different plants. And berberine does magic where it activates AMPK, which is a very important enzyme in the body. And if you have low AMPK, all these bad things happen. So if you increase AMPK, you're going to lead to better lipids, better mitochondrial function, lower inflammation, lower risk of heart failure, and you're going to improve blood sugar, and there's no doubt you are going to lose weight. Now, berberine does pretty much the same thing in some ways that Repatha drug did that we talked about before, but it does it naturally. So if we're looking to increase LDL receptors, we're looking to do some healthy things in the body, then we can just add in a little berberine and let it work its magic. Berberine, as far as the studies are concerned, the literature is very clear. Total cholesterol is dropped by 18%, LDL by 21%, fasting blood sugar is reduced, hemoglobin A1C dropped from 7.5 to 6.6. It's been studied versus the pharmaceutical metformin and works just as well. Now, there's also evidence that berberine is a natural blood thinner. So if you go to this particular article, you will see the references on how berberine is a blood thinner and does some fantastic, fantastic things. Berberine lowers your risk of cancer. 443 studies. Last check. Another phenomenal supplement is probiotics. In a large meta-analysis of 11 trials, you can see that LDL particles and total cholesterol are reduced when you give the body what it needs, and the body needs good, healthy bacteria in its gut, and that's when all the magic happens. So there's so much research going on right now with probiotics and the miracle products that they are. You can see here once again that probiotics do so many different things in the body, and including blood pressure and stimulating the immune cells and modifying that cholesterol panel, reducing leaky gut. Fiber is all important. If we look at the importance of fiber, there's so many different studies that show reduction in cholesterol because fiber binds lipids in the gut, and then you poop them out the other side. One of my favorite products is organic India psyllium husk powder. I do not recommend anything that's got any kind of artificial sweeteners or artificial colors in there. And once again, you want that psyllium husk to be organic. Garlic is another one of nature's wonderful, perfect foods. And what it does in the supplement form, we can see here how it decreases LDL particles, LDL oxidation, reduces plaque formation, inhibits platelets, increases fibrinolytic activity, lowers blood pressure, blood sugar, anti-cancer, antimicrobial, and as a chelator. Is there anything that garlic doesn't do? Just make sure that your significant other takes garlic as well, because it can give off an odor in many people. Vitamin A supplementation does some magic. Vitamin A helps to increase the receptors and increase the transport from macrophages, which are gathering in all those excess LDL particles, and it just shuttles that free cholesterol over to mature HDLs where they can be reprocessed. So vitamin A is fantastic in that arena. Vitamin A decreases decreases death risk after bypass surgery, gets you out of the hospital sooner. And also glutathione is also beneficial in this arena to help usher out the old cholesterol from plaque and pull it into HDLs. Vitamin K does some magic as well, reduces risk of CAD, lowers blood pressure, inflammation, improves blood sugar, lowers cancer risk, decreased overall mortality. Time-release niacin does some wonderful things as well, as you can see here. And niacin is a fantastic supplement. And here you can see from the Coronary Drug Project that time-release niacin saves lives. So typically we do this one capsule at bedtime to work its magic. Red yeast rice is another thing that's got some evidence behind it. I don't use a lot of it in my practice, but in people that have had previous cardiovascular events or they have very high ApoB, ApoA ratios, we'll throw some red yeast rice and we'll take that at night. Big fan of laser therapy and what laser can do. And you can see that laser in the study reduced total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides. So big fan of the laser. And here we've got our lipid protocol and how things work. So we've got this all spelled out for you. Do you need everything on this list? No. Speak with your natural doctor and see if this list is appropriate for you. And we can see this example here. We've got this patient who the old results are on the right, and then we put them on the plan, and we retest 3 months down the road. And the main thing I want you to get out of this is look what we did as far as ApoB to ApoA, that ratio that when it's high is a very, very significant risk factor. And now we got it down to 0.6. So we're clearly moving in the right direction. And this person can do better because their triglycerides are still 163. That is still a sign that a person is taking in too much sugar and too much carb. Finally, we've got our 10 health commandments here. We've got get responsible paleo, eat those right foods, eat organic, eat free-range grass-fed meats, eat wild seafood, eat nuts and seeds and eggs and avocados and coconuts, eat your organ meats and reap all the benefits, eat fermented foods if you're looking to crank up levels of probiotics, which we should all be. Get your sunshine, get your sleep, get active, get outside, hike, bike, walk, garden, get hydrated, drink high-quality water, preferably in glass, or you may want to look into getting an under-the-counter system. On our website, we carry the Pristine Hydro system, and it's worked wonders for our family. It'll work wonders for yours. Get chiropractic care. Chiropractic care, by using the spine and the bones to make changes to the neurologic system, is how chiropractic works. And the evidence is becoming more and more that for the last 125 years that people have been going to see chiropractors. They are not all wrong. They go because they just feel better. And sometimes you don't need studies to tell you that you just feel better. But all of my patients are under chiropractic care, and they all get fantastic results when doing so. Get rid of the stress out of your lives. Stress is a major, major problem. Get rid of it. Get away from environmental toxins and pollutants and air pollution and all those things that no doubt cause cardiovascular disease. Get grounded. Get tested, and get quality supplements. We are the Doctors Wolfson. I want to thank you again for this presentation. We are awakening the world to wellness, and we hope you stay with us going forward. Be healthy, be well.